profits from war. Everyone with power, and no one with a conscience. That is the short answer. The longer answer is the one that will change how you see your money. Because right now, in 2026, every major power on Earth has a financial reason to keep the wars going. Not one of them profits from peace. Now, before you dismiss that, before your brain files it under conspiracy, I want you to notice something. Chris McIntosh, the founder of Capitalist Exploits, has spent decades mapping capital flows across geopolitical fault lines. And when he laid out the incentive structure behind these conflicts, something clicked. It was not a theory. It was a map. And once you begin to see it, you find you cannot unsee it. Because think about this. If you have a retirement account, if you own a single share of anything, then the question, when does this war end, is quietly costing you money every day you leave it unanswered. Most people want a date on a calendar. The people actually making money right now, they're looking at who benefits from there being no date at all. Over the next 10 minutes, I'm going to walk you through every major actor in these conflicts. You will see what the market is not priced in, and by the end, you will understand the one asset class that wins no matter which scenario plays out. But first, there is a question nobody on financial television is asking, and the answer starts with a map that Wall Street does not want you to see. Chris McIntosh calls it the incentive map, and the moment you see it, global headlines start reading like a balance sheet. Start with Russia. Russia is fighting Ukraine, but Ukraine is not really the opponent. Ukraine is the battlefield. The real opponent is the Western military machine that funded and armed this war from day one. So ask yourself what Russia actually wants. It wants its real opponent stretched thin. Feel the logic of this. Every dollar Washington sends to the Middle East is a dollar that does not go to Kyiv. Every political fight in Congress over Israel and Iran is political capital that Russia does not have to spend. Russia benefits from the war continuing. Now notice what happens when you look east. China. Energy is China's deepest structural weakness. Russia and Iran are the two major energy sources that sit outside Western control. If the West wins in the Middle East, it tightens a noose around Chinese energy security. So China watches, it waits, and it has every reason to let the West bleed resources into credibility in a theater that is not Beijing's problem. Picture this, a boardroom in Zhongnanhai. Senior officials studying a map of the Strait of Malacca, where 23 million barrels of oil pass through every single day, through a channel narrow enough to block with a few cargo ships. They are not watching the news. They are reading the same incentive map Chris laid out. And what they see next is the part that should concern every investor alive. Because the next actor on this map is the one playing the longest game of all. Iran's playbook is not complicated, and that is exactly what makes it dangerous. They studied Vietnam. You cannot win a conventional war against a superior military, but you can bleed them, slowly, patiently, over years, until the domestic political will collapses under its own weight. Iran is prepared to do this indefinitely. Let that settle for a moment. Now add the Gulf states. Chris McIntosh points to this as the most interesting actor on the board and the most trapped. For 50 years, Gulf nations recycled petrodollars into US Treasuries and American equity markets. In return, they got military protection. That deal is breaking, and you can already feel it. Turkey has refused to let the US and Israel use its bases for strikes on Iran. Stop and think about what that means. Once you publicly refuse Washington, the relationship changes permanently. The petrodollar recycling arrangement that anchored demand for US Treasuries for half a century is now under structural pressure. And here is what the market has not priced in. Pay close attention. US stealth aircraft can now be targeted. US defense equipment, purchased by allies at enormous cost, has underperformed in a real shooting war. The invincibility myth that held together decades of American deterrence has cracked, and you cannot fix a cracked myth with a press conference. So now you see the situation. Every major power locked in. None of them incentivized to stop. But there is a question almost nobody is asking, and it is the only question that matters if you have money in the market. What does all of this mean for your money? Chris McIntosh has been positioning his readers around one core insight, and I want you to really hear this. Natural resource ownership is now equivalent to superpower status. That is not a slogan. It is arithmetic. The Strait of Hormuz carries 21 million barrels a day. The Strait of Malacca carries another 23 million. Together, 44 million barrels every single day. Picture it this way. Enough oil to fill 2.8 million backyard swimming pools flows through two narrow waterways that could be disrupted by a handful of naval vessels. Now imagine you are a fund manager in Singapore or a pension administrator in Ohio, and you are just beginning to realize what that means. Every nation that depends on those flows is reassessing its exposure right now. Every nation that controls or sits near those choke points has discovered it holds leverage it never fully understood. We are entering a period when all of these choke points get contested, not just by military force, commercially, diplomatically, financially. The old assumption that a military power alone guarantees resource access died somewhere in the fog of this war. And for your portfolio, this changes everything. Hard assets, energy, emerging markets, and resource-rich geographies. These are not short-term trades anymore. They are structural positions for a world where the foundational assumptions of the last 30 years are being dismantled in real time. From the trading floors of the Chicago Mercantile Exchange to ordinary investors checking a 401k at the kitchen table, this shift touches everyone. But here is the part that determines whether you are ahead of it or behind it. Because there are only two paths from here, and one of them has already started. There are two scenarios, and as you consider both, you might begin to notice which one feels more likely. In the first, some kind of resolution emerges. Tensions cool. Oil prices settle. Markets exhale. But even in that scenario, the damage is done. The American deterrence brand does not snap back. Alliance structures have already shifted. Turkey's refusal. Gulf states quietly reconsidering military partnerships. African nations moving toward non-Western alignments. These are not reversible decisions. They are structural breaks. The hard asset and energy premium does not vanish because someone signs a ceasefire. In the second scenario, the incentive structure holds. The conflicts grind on. Energy choke points stay contested. Defense spending climbs. Resource-rich nations gain bargaining power they have never had in their history. In that world, investors who already own the assets that benefit from scarcity, from energy security concerns, from the repricing of real things over paper promises, they do well. Now here is what Chris McIntosh says about timing, and this is worth writing down. Clarity always arrives, but it arrives late, and it arrives expensive. The question is whether you want to be positioned before clarity or after. And that brings us to the part most people skip, which is exactly why most people underperform. So let me bring it together. Every major geopolitical actor has a financial incentive to keep this going. The market has not priced that in. Natural resource ownership is the new measure of national power, and the investors who positioned early in hard assets, energy, and resource-rich emerging markets are not guessing. They are reading the incentive map. Everything I just walked you through is the why, the specific names, the exact positions, the portfolio construction. That is what Chris McIntosh and his team lay out inside the Capitalist Exploits Insider newsletter. The link is in the description below. If you are the kind of investor who wants to understand the forces shaping markets before the crowd figures it out, you already know where to go. Subscribing takes 30 seconds, and the difference between subscribing and not subscribing is simple. The next time the market reprices around one of these choke points, you are either reading the headline or you are already ahead of it. That is the difference. And now you get to decide which side of it you are on. The link is right there.